They say life doesn't collapse all at once. But that night, mine did. One by one, everything I thought was mine. Gone. My job, my home, my family, my dignity. And the cruelest part? It all happened in less than 24 hours. I thought I'd hit rock bottom. But I was wrong. Because sitting in a small diner drenched in rain, staring at a stranger with eyes that seemed to know me better than I knew myself, that was when my real story began. Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. The day began like any other. Alarm blaring, bitter coffee, kiss on the cheek from my kids as they got ready for school. My wife barely looked at me. Nothing new there. I told myself I was fine. I told myself things weren't as bad as they seemed. But I was wrong. At work, my boss called me into his office. His voice was too calm, his tie too perfect. And before I could even sit down, he delivered the words that shattered me. "We're letting you go." Effective immediately. No explanation that mattered. No sympathy. Just a folder, a handshake, and security standing nearby like I was some kind of criminal. 10 years of sweat, late nights, and missed birthdays, all erased in 30 seconds. I walked out with a box of my things, heart pounding, hands shaking. And if I'd thought losing my job was the worst thing that could happen that day, I was about to learn how wrong I was. I drove home, rain streaking the windshield. I kept replaying my boss's words like a broken record cutting into my skull. Maybe, I thought, my wife would understand. Maybe she'd hold me, tell me it was going to be okay. Instead, I walked into silence, and then her voice, sharp, cold, final. "I can't do this anymore." She stood there with her bags packed, kids waiting by the door. "I need stability. The kids need it too. You can't even hold a job." Her words sliced through me. I begged, I pleaded, but her eyes were already somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't follow. She left. Just like that. I thought I had lost everything, but the universe wasn't done tearing me apart. Not yet. That night, the city drowned in rain. I wandered the streets, aimless, numb. Neon lights blurred through the downpour, sirens wailed in the distance, but none of it felt real. Every step echoed with the same thought. Why me? Hours slipped by. My clothes clung to my skin, soaked. My hands were cold. My body ached. I passed bustling restaurants, warm homes, people laughing under umbrellas, and I hated them, because they had what I'd lost. But then, like a lighthouse in the fog, I saw it. A diner. Small. Lonely. Open. And inside, something was waiting for me that I never could have imagined. The bell above the door jingled weakly as I stepped inside. Warmth wrapped around me instantly. The smell of coffee. The crackle of a small jukebox in the corner. Only a few people were there. A waitress wiping down tables. A trucker hunched over a burger. I slid onto the farthest stool at the counter, hoping to disappear. The waitress placed a mug of coffee in front of me without a word. I wrapped my hands around it, desperate for its warmth, and that's when I felt it. A presence. Someone sliding onto the stool beside me. I turned my head. An old man, wrinkled skin, silver hair, eyes so sharp they felt like they were looking straight through me. He studied me for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You look just like my son." The man's words hit me like lightning. 5 words. And somehow I knew my night wasn't done taking pieces of me. I froze. His voice wasn't loud, but the weight of it landed like a hammer on glass. "You look just like my son." I tried to smile politely, the way you do when strangers say odd things, but his gaze didn't waver. His eyes weren't casual. They were hungry, desperate. I managed to stammer, "I'm sorry?" The man leaned closer, lowering his voice. "My boy disappeared 35 years ago, walked out after an argument, and never came back." A shiver ran down my spine, not from the rain, from his words. They carried grief so old it should have turned to dust, but it hadn't. It was alive. And for some reason, sitting there, I felt like his grief was pulling me in, like it had been waiting for me all along. The waitress refilled our mugs, barely glancing our way. The old man, Walter, he told me, kept staring. "You even hold the cup the same way," he murmured, "like it's going to slip away if you don't grip it tight." I wanted to laugh it off, to tell him he was mistaken. But when I glanced at the window's reflection, the tired lines under my eyes, the sag in my shoulders, I wondered if maybe I did look like someone who'd left. And truth be told, I had left things, my marriage, my family, not by choice, but still gone. Walter's voice softened. "Do you know the worst part of regret? It doesn't fade. It digs in. It grows teeth. And for the first time that night, I wondered if I'd stumbled into that diner by accident, or if something larger had dragged me there." Walter's story spilled slowly, like a tap that hadn't been turned in years. He'd been a carpenter, he said. Rough hands, sharp tongue. His son, Michael, had wanted to leave their small town, to study art. Walter, stubborn and proud, called it a waste of time. The last words he ever said to his son, "You'll never make it without me." And then Michael left. "Do you know what it's like?" Walter asked, voice cracking. "To realize the last thing your child heard from you was poison?" I swallowed hard. Because I did know something like that. The last thing my wife heard from me was a bitter defensive rant about how she never supported me. The last thing my kids heard was me slamming the door. Different story, same guilt. And that's when I realized Walter's son wasn't the only one who'd disappeared. I had too, just in a different way. Thunder shook the diner walls. Rain battered the windows. The trucker left. The waitress disappeared into the back. It was just me and Walter now. He leaned closer, voice dropping. "I used to dream," he said, "that Michael would come back rich, successful, that he'd throw it in my face, prove I'd been wrong." His smile twisted. "Sometimes, I still think, maybe he did. Maybe he's out there, living big, pretending I don't exist." He stared at me so long, I had to look away. And that's when I felt it. The creeping suspicion that Walter wasn't just mistaking me for his son, he was testing me. My chest tightened. I wanted to leave, but my legs wouldn't move. Walter's hands shook as he reached into his coat pocket. For a heartbeat, I thought he might pull out something dangerous. But instead, he slid an envelope across the counter. Its edges were frayed, its paper yellow with time. "I wrote this for him," Walter whispered. Every year I rewrote it, but I never sent it. Too ashamed, I stared at the envelope. Something in me knew. Opening it would change everything. I pushed it back toward him. "I can't." But his hand shot out, gripping mine. His skin was papery, but his strength was iron. "Read it," he said. His eyes blazed. "Please." And in that moment I realized I wasn't getting out of that diner without opening it. I tore it open. The paper trembled in my hands. "Michael, I was wrong. I let anger speak louder than love. If you ever see this, know I would give anything to take it back, to tell you I'm proud, to tell you I love you. You'll always be my son." The words blurred through my tears. I hadn't cried when I lost my job. I hadn't cried when my wife walked out. But here, in a diner with a stranger's letter in my hands, the dam broke. Walter's eyes shone with wetness, too. He whispered, "Now tell me, are you him?" The diner was silent, just the hum of neon. My pulse roared in my ears. I wanted to say no, to leave, to end it. But instead, I said, nothing. Because in that moment, a terrifying thought struck me. What if fate had dragged me here for a reason? Walter leaned closer, his voice shaking but determined. If you're not my son, then why do you look at me with his eyes? Walter's words hung between us like a blade suspended midair. If you're not my son, then why do you look at me with his eyes? I couldn't answer. My chest heaved with uneven breaths. The diner's neon light buzzed overhead, and the smell of burnt coffee clung to the air. I wanted to scream at him, "I'm not your son!" But the truth was, I wasn't entirely sure anymore. Because something inside me, deep in my bones, whispered that this night wasn't random. That maybe, just maybe, blood had led me here. Walter leaned back, his expression unreadable. His fingers tapped the counter in an uneven rhythm, like a clock running out of time. "You know," he said, his voice softer now, "there's a way to prove it." I frowned. "Prove what?" "That you're mine. That fate didn't put you here by mistake." From his coat, he pulled out something small, a locket. Its silver chain was tarnished, but inside, a faded photograph showed a boy of 16, with dark hair and eyes that looked eerily like mine. My stomach dropped. Walter's gaze bored into me. This belonged to Michael's mother. He took it the night he left. I found it again years later, buried under the floorboards of his room. He hid things there, secrets. If you're really him, you'll know what else is hidden in that house. And just like that, the night stopped being about grief and became a test I wasn't ready for. I should have walked away, left the diner, pretended none of this had happened. But instead, I found myself in Walter's rusted sedan, the rain streaking down the windshield as we drove into the darkness. The roads twisted through forgotten neighborhoods, past houses with broken fences and yards overrun with weeds. Walter said nothing for most of the drive, but every so often, his eyes flicked toward me, studying my profile like an artist checking his sketch. Finally, he broke the silence. "If you're lying to me, I'll know." The weight of his words pressed down harder than the storm outside. And in that moment, I wondered, was I being tested or trapped? We pulled into the driveway of a house that looked like it hadn't been alive in decades. Paint peeled from the siding, and the porch sagged under the weight of time. "This is where it happened," Walter murmured. His voice was reverent, almost fearful. Inside, the air smelled of dust and wood rot. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like footsteps of people long gone. Walter led me to a small bedroom. The wallpaper was peeling, and in the corner stood a bed frame stripped of its mattress. "Michael's room," he said. I ran my hand along the wall, tracing faded outlines where posters once hung, and then I felt it. A loose floorboard under my shoe. Walter's eyes lit up. "Go on." I knelt, pried it open. Beneath, wrapped in yellowed cloth, was a sketchbook. My throat tightened as I flipped it open. Inside were drawings, rough but full of life. A boy's dreams, trapped in pencil strokes. And on the last page, a note. "One day I'll come back. And when I do, I'll prove him wrong." Walter's hand shook as he touched the page. Tears welled in his eyes. "Michael," he whispered. And I realized with dread, whether I was his son or not, this man was starting to believe it. Back in the living room, Walter poured 2 glasses of whiskey. His hand no longer trembled. There was steel in his eyes now. "I built an empire after he left," Walter said. "Wood, steel, construction. Half this city has my name on its bones. But wealth means nothing when your bloodline rots." He leaned forward. "If you are him, or even if you're not, but fate put you here, then everything I built could be yours. The businesses, the fortune, the legacy I almost choked on my drink." "Why me?" "Because I've seen what's left of me," Walter said bitterly. "Vultures circling, waiting for me to die. If I hand it to them, it'll be gone in months. But you've known pain, loss, failure. That's the kind of man who can carry it. And that's when I understood. This wasn't just about a missing son. It was about replacing him. The offer burned in my chest. Riches, power, a second chance at life. But with it came a darker thought. What if Walter wasn't just some grieving father? What if this was a trap? A way to drag me into something I couldn't escape? I asked quietly. And if I say no? Walter's eyes hardened. Then I'll know you're not him. And I'll have no reason to keep you. The air went cold. And suddenly I wasn't sure if I'd stumbled into an inheritance or a prison. Walter stood, moving toward an old cabinet. From it, he pulled a locked box. He placed it on the table with a dull thud. Inside were documents, birth certificates, property deeds, bank accounts. But tucked among them was something that made my breath catch, a DNA test kit. Walter slid it across the table. Tomorrow, he said, we'll know for sure. But tonight, drink with me, sit with me, pretend, just for a few hours, that you never left. His voice broke on the last words. I stared at the test, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to run. Part of me wanted to stay. Because if this test said what I feared, my life would never belong to me again. We sat in that decaying living room, two shadows clinging to the past. Walter talked about business, about mistakes, about the way power isolates you. I listened, caught between pity and fear. At one point, he looked at me with something close to love. If you're my son, you'll save me. If you're not, you'll damn me. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling, the storm outside echoing the one inside me. And I realized, whether I was his son or not, after tonight, nothing in my life would ever be the same. Morning light crept through the broken blinds. Walter placed the DNA kit on the table, his eyes locked on mine. Today, he said, voice steady, we find out the truth. I'll never forget the way Walter's eyes looked that night. Not sharp, not angry, but tired. Tired in a way that made the whole diner go silent around us. He leaned in and whispered, "What if I told you that tonight, everything you lost could be rebuilt, and more?" My heart skipped. I wanted to believe him, but I was too broken to hope. Then came the truth. Walter confessed he was dying. No family, no friends, no one left to carry his name. He had built an empire quietly. Real estate, investments, savings stacked away where no one could touch them. A small fortune waiting for dust. And then, his words hit me like a hammer. I want you to take it. All of it. But not for free. You'll have to prove you won't waste it. He wasn't offering money. He was offering me a test, a chance to rise or fall. I shook my head. Why me, Walter? I'm a failure. My wife left me. My kids hate me. I'm nobody. He slammed his hand on the table, trembling but fierce. Failures are just people who quit too soon. You're still breathing, aren't you? Then you haven't quit. And in that moment, I realized the diner wasn't an escape. It was the starting line. Minutes later, Walter's body gave way. He collapsed right in front of me. As they rushed him out, he grabbed my wrist and shoved something into my hand, a small, rusted key with an address scrawled on a card. Days later, I followed it. It led me to a dusty old workshop on the edge of town. Inside, boxes of files, savings bonds, property deeds, and a handwritten letter. His words echoed from the page. This is your fire. Build something with it. Don't waste it, I am Michael. And what happened next wasn't instant magic. It was grind, sweat, nights staring at numbers I barely understood. But Walter's lessons were there. Patience, persistence, discipline. Slowly I rebuilt. A business rose from that workshop. My children, the ones who once couldn't even look me in the eye, started coming back around. And me? I stopped running from my failures. I started using them as fuel. Years passed. I stood at Walter's grave, not as a broken man, but as someone who had clawed his way back. That's when a lawyer approached, holding a sealed envelope, Walter's last gift. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a note, short and final. You were never Michael. But you became the son I always dreamed of. I swear the world stopped spinning for a second. I am Michael, and this is what I learned. Sometimes strangers see in us what we can't see ourselves. Sometimes the lowest nights lead to the brightest dawns. Millionaires aren't born, they're built. And sometimes they're built in the quiet corner of a diner, with nothing but coffee, regret, and a second chance.